Hey guys, what's going on? Mr. B here again. We're going to be doing our 8th grade course in American history. We learned about yesterday, we learned about quite a few things: segregation, we learned about integration, Thurgood Marshall. We also learned about Brown v. Board of Education. If you didn't get yesterday's video, check on my channel or Google Classroom. Both of those should have it. If you're ready to go, then by all means, let's go. Now, today's lesson is going to be really fascinating. Before we do that, let's go over our do now. Segregation is a word that we had yesterday. As I said, it means the separating of races, the separation between whites and people of color, blacks, Mexicans, whatever race you are. It is a separation between the two. Integration is the exact opposite. Integration means to bring them together. Leading thousands in a boycott, a young preacher named Martin Luther King Jr. becomes a leader in the civil rights movement. The Jim Crow laws are these legal loopholes that people in the South used to use in order to push into segregation. Thurgood Marshall is a brilliant lawyer who helps civil rights move forward when he fights to end segregation in schools during Brown v. Board of Education. Okay? And we're going to start. Today, we have a fascinating subject: John F. Kennedy. We're going to talk about today Kennedy's good things that he wanted to do and some of the bad things that he did. Kennedy's only in office for 2 years. Really, really weird type of thing, especially because Kennedy is going to be assassinated. A lot of weird similarities between Kennedy and Lincoln. We'll get into that next class on Monday when I post again. But Kennedy is going to be a really polarizing type of president. Something I've talked a lot about is how I remember, I'm only 28, but I remember 9/11 very, very clearly. I remember it just like yesterday. But people who were born way before me, the baby boom era, the boomers, if you ask a lot of them if they remember about Kennedy's assassination, a lot of them remember. A lot of them remember exactly where they were in a really, really crystallized moment. Ask your parents or grandparents, however old they are. I'm not one to judge. But quote of the day: ask not what your country can do for you, rather ask what you can do for your country. A very famous quote in American history, probably one of the most famous quotes in American history. Let me just move this a little bit so I'm in a better place. There you go. AIM, what happened in Cuba that caused the war to escalate, the Cold War. Well, we're going to see that today. Cuba is going to be one of our main topics today. Fidel Castro, communism. We're still in the Cold War. We're still dealing with it, and we move on. Now, in 1957, the Soviets launched a satellite called Sputnik into space. Now, this shocks Americans, leading them to believe that Soviets can now launch nuclear weapons to American cities. Not the case. They didn't have intercontinental abilities yet. Eisenhower and then later Kennedy, who we're going to be talking about, becomes obsessed with getting a man to the moon. And he creates NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Now, to create their own program to try and get a man to the moon. So we're going to jump ahead about 12 years just for a little brief moment where NASA actually succeeds in getting a man to the moon. And, well, don't really believe people who say that this was a conspiracy. I will tell you, just search up the video of not Neil Armstrong, who we're about to talk about, but Buzz Aldrin talking to a man who denied that he went to the moon. Buzz Aldrin doesn't take it so kindly and punches him in the face. So don't believe a lot of people who say that the moon landing was a conspiracy. It totally happened. I'm willing to plant my flag there and stand on that grave. So 12 years ahead, NASA actually succeeds in getting a man to the moon with their Apollo 11 mission. Eisenhower is not in power anymore. The first man to walk on the moon is Neil Armstrong. he famously quoted saying, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." A very deep philosophical quote that I'm sure a lot of us can understand. And if you don't understand it, ask someone. I can't really answer that question for you right now through a video. I put a video here of the space landing. Obviously, it got taken down. You might want to just check up on YouTube or the Googles, wherever you guys would go. Just don't go on TikTok. And look up that video of the first moon landing. It's fascinating. But we move on, because in 1960, 3 years after Eisenhower launches his NASA, he launches his mission for the moon, his term's up. He's done 8 years as president. He was a really good president. A lot of people like him. But it's time for new leadership, and people look to the youngest president ever elected, the 35th president of the United States, JFK, John F. Kennedy. He wins by 100,000 votes out of the 70 million counted. That is a very, very, very slim margin. He's shocked to learn that 1/5, 1 out of 5 Americans live below the poverty line, meaning they're very, very poor. Although Kennedy wins some support, Congress is mostly going to reject these anti-poverty measures that he wants to put in place. He wants to help the people, he wants to help the poor, he wants to help even out the country. He was a Democrat, and he was a great Democrat. He was a Democrat's Democrat, as you can say. He really believed in their way, and he believed in how they did things. And he was, if he was actually alive, speaking presidentially, not from a personal standpoint, I know Kennedy had a lot of personal things that were a little iffy, but politically, he was amazing. Kennedy faces his first real test as president when dealing with the new communist leader of Cuba. Cuba turns over into a communist country, and they, Fidel Castro, I don't say they elect him because that's not really how it works, but Fidel Castro is going to become the leader of Cuba. Castro is going to hold on to power for quite a while. In fact, Fidel Castro, this same man, is actually going to meet President Obama. You can see that video if you go on YouTube, you check on Google, you can see them meeting and actually see what they had to say about each other afterwards. It's really, really fascinating in that sense, because Obama, meanwhile, has a lot of praise for Castro. He criticizes some things, but he has praise for Castro. But Castro, on the other hand, is like, we don't need these guys. They're terrible. Check it out. Castro leads a revolution in Cuba after support from the Soviet Union. Yeah, those guys again. Russia, they're back. Starts to support communist revolutions in Latin countries. Remember, we said that Russia wanted to become a superpower, and in order to do that, they wanted to spread communism to as many places as possible. The domino theory, something we talked about in class, we're going to see more of when we get to Vietnam. His actions force thousands of Cubans into exile. Many risk their lives to escape and come to the USA. In fact, still a lot of people risk their lives to come to the USA to this day. If you guys are sports fans, check out the 30 for 30 on El Duque and his brother, Levon Hernandez, who came over here from Cuba. They were actually stuck on an island for 3 days without any food or water until the Coast Guard found them. People die all the time coming over from Cuba. It's a very dangerous journey, even though it's very close to Florida. You're going over real ocean, a lot of waves. Jose Fernandez, the famous Marlins pitcher who passed away too early. His mother actually fell out of the raft when they were on their way from Cuba. At 16 years old, Jose Fernandez dives into the water and brings his mother out, saving her life. A really fascinating story. A lot of MLB players come over from Cuba, try to escape that life. Yoenis Cespedes, another one of them. Let's go Mets. But, you know, Cuba, very strange place, very communist place, very tough place to live. It is not like the United States. A lot of people there struggling with a lot of things. You go over there with a bunch of batteries. People there cannot get batteries that easy. I know someone who just went to Cuba, brought batteries. The people were, oh, we're going to sell all the extras of these for so much money. You just fed us for months. Crazy, crazy situation there. Now, in 61, a group of Cuban exiles are secretly going to be trained by the CIA and, well, given permission by Kennedy to try to take Cuba back for democracy. They're going to try a coup. Remember, a coup, we talked about this especially when Hitler and Mussolini tried to take over in their respective countries. A coup is taking over the government by force, is flipping over the government, flipping over the table, saying, we're done, we're starting a new government. The new government starts now. And they plan to do that in the Bay of Pigs invasion. You can see the Bay of Pigs is right over here near Havana, Cuba, Guantanamo Bay, all the way on the south over there. On the coast of Cuba, the invasion was meant to cause a revolution, as I said, and overthrow Castro from power. The invasion fails, and Castro uses it as propaganda to just strengthen his own power. Now, this is really fascinating. This is egg completely on the face of Kennedy. Kennedy really wanted to do something nice. He wanted to do something special. Unfortunately, it fails. And now Kennedy is going to be at a huge disadvantage because now his main idea lands up backfiring on here. And it's from the CIA. It's supposed to be secret, not so secret anymore. And Kennedy is not looking real good. And it doesn't get any better for Kennedy because Kennedy, excuse me for a second, I just need to take some Dr. Pepper. Cheers, guys. Now, Kennedy is going to have another problem on his hands because a year later, in 1962, there are going to be aerial photographs showing the Soviet Union building a nuclear missile base in Cuba, close enough to launch into the United States. Kennedy demands that missiles be removed because they are a threat to world peace. He also makes a blockade around Cuba, hoping to deter any Soviet ships bringing more weapons. For 13 days, the world is at a total end of the world type of feeling. This is when those nuclear fallout shelter signs start coming up everywhere. Everyone's building bunkers. They're scared. They think nuclear war is going to happen. And most Americans, most politicians even, thought that this was what was going to happen. But it actually doesn't. At the last minute, the Soviet ships, they're all coming towards each other. The Soviet and American ships getting closer and closer and closer and closer and closer and closer. And then at the last minute, they just turn around. The ships withdrew the weapons from Cuba, and Dean Rask, who was the Secretary of State, said at the time, we were eyeball to eyeball, and the other fellow just blinked. So the Americans get out of a huge problem because having nuclear weapons in Cuba, obviously, really scary for the people of the United States. You never want to know that a country right off your border is in possession of such a strong weapon, especially if it's your enemy, being supported by a bigger enemy. So America dodges a bullet, or in this case, a missile. But all right, guys, that's it for today. We're going to pick this back up again Monday with JFK's assassination. There's going to be a documentary for you guys to watch, a very good documentary on PBS Nova, Cold Case Files, about the magic bullet. If you don't know about the magic bullet, I can't wait to tell you about it on Monday. Like, subscribe, whatever, that's a joke. But hey guys, I hope you're staying safe, staying healthy. Please make sure to wash your hands every single time you come in or out of the house, soap and water, and I'll see you guys soon. Shabbat Shalom.